Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Marks Library. And I'm Philip Carr. I'm the professor of Native American Studies here, the Chief Calvin McGee Professor of Native American Studies, I should say. And it's a real honor to be here. And I started to write down some notes, and you'll be glad that I ended up not, but hopefully I don't wander too much. But I am going to go back in time as an archaeologist. So this is I have completed 25 years at the University of South Alabama. And the only inkling of a Native American Studies program we had in 1999 is that once every 2 years, I taught a course, AN 340, Native American Cultures. And in 2013, working with the Porch Band of Creek Indians, they endowed a Native American Studies program here. We have a minor now in Native American Studies, and with us is the first graduate with a minor in Native American Studies, Mr. Billy Bailey, who is also now the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer with the Porch Band of Creek Indians. So that is a wonderful thing for us to see. We also have a Native American Student Association that did not exist before 2013 either. And we have an officer, Caitlin Lambeth, with us here tonight. So we have these larger things, so to speak, but this exhibit for me really gives a chance to bring things home and for people to learn about Native American studies who maybe don't take a class, don't know about the minor and things of that nature. But the library provides such a wonderful space for evocative art to be displayed. And I also want to recognize two of my staff, Chelsea Cook and Andrew Bowen, who put together a complimentary exhibit to our main exhibit on the indigenous people of the Southeast, focused on the time period from which Janie Umsted, our artist, takes her inspiration. And you'll see parallels between the two exhibits if you spend the time with them. Jane is a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma and serves as a curator of the Semple Family Museum of Native American Art at Southeastern Oklahoma State University. She received a BFA from the University of Oklahoma in 1969 and an MF from Southeastern Oklahoma State University in 1989. She retired from the Durant Public Schools in 2007, where she was an art teacher for Durant Middle School. Bless you, teaching middle school students. I think that's the hardest grade to reach. Fourth grade, that's my wheelhouse. Last year, President Joe Biden appointed Jane, along with only 5 others, to the board of the Institute of American Arts Trustees. Please join me in welcoming Janie Umsted.
Thank you, Philip. That's a very nice introduction. And hello to all of you, and thank you for being here. I have to kind of first say that I'm an artist, a real artist. I've been an artist for a long time. I'm 77, and I've been doing art for 70 years. My mother was an artist, and it just seems ordinary to me, and I'm very relaxed when I do my art, but I'm not known for my speaking engagements. This is a little bit intimidating for me, and but I did want to share some things with you, and also before I forget it, my husband is here with me, and he is part of everything that I do, Gus Umsted, and then my niece here is Mary Kate Rainier, who grew up in Birmingham, and she's doing her master's studies here. And it was just a coincidence. She didn't know she was here. I didn't know she was here. But we found out that we found each other just this evening. So it's a special occasion in that regard. But I did want to start out and just make a few comments. I want you to tell you a few things about me and why on earth, as Philip was talking about, I was inspired and to do the type of art I do. But it's been it's been with me for so long. I knew from a very young child, maybe 10 years old, made a trip. Well, first of all, I've known since I was younger than that, my grandparents, my grandfather was an original enrollee in the Choctaw tribe of Oklahoma. So that's really a special thing in Oklahoma because, as many of you scholars know, the Choctaws were removed along with the Creeks, along with the Chickasaws, Seminoles, and the Cherokees were all, did I miss one of them? Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creeks, Seminoles, and Cherokees, yeah. The 5 civilized tribes, I'm sure you've heard about them. They were all removed from their homelands. And so, so it's been interesting to me tonight to come to this place and this area that I've never been to before, and kind of feel a real kinship, just being here, looking at the land, looking at around the topography, looking at the water, and kind of imagining where my ancestors would have been, no doubt, because of all the trading that was going on. And know that still there are families, the Creek Nation here tonight, the Porch Creek Nation is here, and of course the Creeks were also removed, but there's all kinds of stories and history wrapped around why are there still creeks in this area, and why are there creeks in Oklahoma. I think it must be common knowledge that part of them were removed, and so part of them were not going to leave for anything. And what brave souls that stayed here from those 5 tribes, and many other tribes also. But anyway, I'm here to kind of talk about what you're probably interested in, and that is my art. Let me give you a little bit of a background first. I mentioned my grandfather. I'm a 6th generation Oklahoman, and my great grandfather is this man right here, and his name is Peter Pitchland. And this book was written by a professor at the University of Oklahoma. And so he was the chief of the Choctaw tribes in the 1860s during the Civil War. Quite a studious and colorful character. And when I was very young, my grandmother told me all about this man, and really he is my inspiration, not only from historically, but also because of this piece of artwork, who was painted by George Catlin, and the original resides in the Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. And so this is the reason I became an artist, is this painting. Wow. Because, became a Native American art. I was just smitten by my heritage and also my artistic ability, and in a very artistic family early on. So I think my art is kind of odd in a lot of ways, because I did a painting. This is a kind of a copy of it. I didn't have a great big copy because the original of this painting, this is a Trail of Tears, and the original is 17 feet long, and it's in the historic, it hangs in the historic museum at Tuscaloosa, Oklahoma. And this is a very, very sad story, as you know, but the odd thing about my art is I use a lot of bright colors. And so I decided to use bright colors in this painting on purpose, just because it's me to do that, but also because I wanted to treat a sad story with optimism, and so it becomes an optimistic story in the end, because it goes from left, from this side, right, I guess. So it's a story starting out here in this area of the United States, Southeast. And when the tribes were happy, just they loved being here. They did not want to move. So they go into the worst winter that they'd ever had in the 1830s. I put the Andrew Jackson soldiers in the painting to show that it was, I'm sorry you can't see this bigger. I'd be glad to pass it around. But anyway, it just hit me that I wanted to tell you about this, because anyway, these are the soldiers. I wanted to show that they're not just going on a trip, that they were being forced on this trail. a lot of symbolism. This represents the Mississippi River. These pine trees represent Arkansas and the mountains there. They had to come through the mountains. And then they traveled through this terrible winter, died, thousands died. And over here is a morning sunrise. This is the red earth of Oklahoma, the red-tailed hawk that I use thematically a lot. And so this represents hope right here, that things will be better. And that's in fact, for the Choctaw tribe of Oklahoma, they survived, and they still survive, and very, very well for a lot of reasons. They had an incredible sustaining power, and faith, and their education, and they're striving to do better all the time. As far as my artwork, like I said, I like to do lots and lots of color, bright color. I also, when this exhibit, Philip asked that I bring this exhibit to Mobile. And I've never done that before. I've never had a group of paintings that traveled to anywhere. I mean, I've had art shows and entered art shows, but never had one travel. So this is quite a compliment and quite a great adventure for my husband and me. And so it makes me feel so happy that you're here, and so happy that you want to see my art. I'll be glad during the time after I quit talking and being nervous for you to kind of read some of the notations, because it kind of explains. In fact, he and I had the talk yesterday. I said, well, do you want me to go painting by painting and just talk about, and I said, there are 18 paintings here, and he said, probably not, because it would take so long, and everybody can read, so maybe you can do that here while we're having our refreshments. But the other, regarding the exhibit, it was at the Choctaw Cultural Center in Durant, Oklahoma. That's the tribal headquarters of the tribe, and that's my hometown, my husband and I's hometown, and I was born and raised there. So I really, really have an emotional attachment to my tribal heritage, and it's just in me. But the theme for that exhibit was circles, because so many, I didn't even realize it, but the lady came to my gallery and wanted to see some of my art, and she said to me, she pointed out, she said, lots of your paintings have circles in them, but and I went, oh yeah, because that's always, I've always done that. I've always done colorful things and things with circles, and I don't know why, but I can't help but think it had something to do with my heritage. Yeah, I believe it did. I do a lot of variety of media. I do acrylics, and I didn't indicate on the labels which ones were acrylic, but I do oil painting, and there's something else that I do that hardly anybody does, and it's batik. Raise your hand if you know what that is. Batik. It's people my age, people that grew up in the 60s and the 70s. But I went to the University of Oklahoma, as Phil said, and it was the 60s. Okay, so the art department there was very, very influenced in the 60s era. And I had been taking art lessons since I was 6 or 7 years old. So it was very important to me to be able to paint an apple to look like an apple. And it was very important to me to make a tree look like a tree. Well, I get to the University of Oklahoma, and they said, don't you think you could do something a little bit more abstract? And I didn't know how to do that. So by the time I got to be a senior, I sort of taught myself this methodology that, what I usually say, it's uncontrolled. I control something that's uncontrollable. And you can imagine taking a piece of cloth, using hot wax. It has to be 220 degrees for this to work. If you try to paint with hot wax, that's what I do. I use the wax as a give me a word. It mask, and it masks out dyes. I only use wax and 100% cotton and dyes to do. Several of these paintings are batik, and you'll be able to tell because they have such a unique look about them. And even though I could paint an apple to look like an apple and a tree to look like a tree, when I do batiks, it kind of looks like an apple, but it has a mind of its own. That wax goes where it wants to a little bit, but I'm able to control it so you can still recognize some of the images. And in the end, I crumble it all up and dye it black, and the black goes into all these cracks that are left from the brittle wax, and then I've got a mess on my hands, another mess, because of just this wadded up looking thing. But I take it out, take the wax out by ironing it in between newsprint. And for the longest time, I used newspapers. And then I started sort of looking at them after I'd done several of them, and they'd have backwards letters on them, which worked out great in the art department at OU. They thought they were wonderful. I became an abstract painter. So anyway, several of them are batik, and just at the time I was at OU, I was really a sculpture major. But the thing I liked the very most was bronze. And I really, really got interested in that. And so fast forward from 1969 when I graduated to 2012, that's how long it took me to actually be able to have the opportunity to cast my first bronze, life-size bronze. I had done a small one at OU. But it took me that much time because, of course, they're awfully expensive. Right. And so the Choctaw tribe gave me that opportunity. And just recently I have done 2 life-size bronzes that I'm so excited about. One was unveiled about a week and a half ago, and one is going to be unveiled after the first of the year. The first one is going to be a depiction of the legend of why the Choctaws and the Chickasaws were at one time one tribe. And the legend goes that there were 2 brothers on this trek. It is a fact that the tribes were migratory. The legend comes in as to whether or not there were actually 2 brothers or 2 factions or a sacred pole. But the legend says that there's a sacred pole and that they traveled to try to find their homelands. And if the pole was leaning at night, or next morning after planting it in the ground, that meant they should stay. If it was leaning, that meant they should go on. And at one point, so the legend goes, there was an argument. One just thought the pole was leaning and one thought the pole was upright. Well, the Chickasaws and the Choctaws the 2 brothers decided to split. So I did the sculpture of this story, and it had never been depicted. It's a great, I don't know if the Creeks, I don't know if you have such a story, but for sure it is a fact that they were one tribe. It is a fact that they split. When and how and all that happened, we don't really know. But the cool thing is that it had never been depicted. And so at the University of Southeastern Oklahoma State University in Durant, now stands this sculpture. And the second one is of the World War I code talkers that were Choctaw. And I'm sure the Creeks, I'm sure a number of tribes were participating in World War I and World War II. But a lot of people think of the Navajo tribe as being the code talkers. But theirs was indicative or representative of World War II. This is World War I, that the Choctaws were the first to use their language to break the codes, the German codes. So the other bronze that I've already finished with, they just have to install it, are 3 soldiers that have authentic World War I uniforms, and I'm looking forward to that being unveiled. So tonight, I'm kind of finished talking about that, but I did want to say that there are a number of images I think you'll kind of recognize, and I would extremely, particularly drawn to this Mississippian era when I did so many of these pieces, because I wanted to know more than what I could find out in Oklahoma about our ancestors being, they weren't always from Oklahoma. So I'm also love history and Oklahoma history and history in general. So the imagery, I would pick and choose different images and mix different media as I would paint. And I like to do people, animals, and also design. So you'll see my design work evident in this work. Some of these pieces are reproductions. There's prints, giclée prints, and some of them are originals. And I have written on the labels if they're original, they're for sale. And you also have that there. And so I would like for you to invite you to come and look.
Yes.
Okay. Whenever Phil says we can.
Well, and we can momentarily. So also there are refreshments at the end. So you might or on that end of the building, I should say. So please enjoy the refreshments and mingle and talk amongst yourselves. Decide which painting is your favorite. See if it matches my favorite, though it does change. Mine changes at times. Enjoy. And Jane has been kind enough that she will answer questions that you have about the artwork as you have a chance to look at it. So please stick around and enjoy the refreshments and the wonderful art and the complimentary exhibit done by the Center for Archaeological Studies. And join me in thanking Jane right now.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, I will lead the way.